It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way except for how it shattered my world. I left the office early, a rare treat after weeks of late nights at the tech startup Mark and I had built from nothing. My plan was simple. Surprise Emily with dinner, maybe rekindle the spark that had been flickering in our marriage lately. I'd even stopped at the overpriced wine shop downtown to grab her favorite crisp Pinot Grigio she always teased was too expensive for a weekday. The bottle felt cold in my hand as I drove home. A small gesture I hoped would make her smile. Our house was a modern 2-story in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where neighbors waved but never pried. When I pulled into the driveway, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. I noticed Emily's car parked at an odd angle, like she'd rushed in. Strange, but I brushed it off. Maybe she'd had a rough day at the marketing firm where she worked. Maybe she'd appreciate the surprise even more. The house was too quiet when I stepped inside. No hum of the dishwasher, no murmur of the television she liked to leave on as background noise. Just silence, heavy and wrong. I set the wine on the kitchen counter, my keys clinking softly against the marble. Then I heard a muffled giggle, light and intimate, drifting from upstairs, from our bedroom. My stomach dropped, a sick lurch like stepping off a cliff. My mind scrambled for excuses. Maybe she was on the phone, laughing with a friend. Maybe it was nothing. But my feet were already moving, carrying me toward the staircase with a dread I couldn't name. I climbed the steps like a ghost, my sneakers silent on the hardwood. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. Shadows shifted behind it, quick and fluid. My hand hovered over the knob, trembling. I didn't want to see, but I couldn't stop myself. And then I saw them. Emily, my wife of 7 years, was tangled in the sheets, her dark hair spilling across the pillow. Her laughter was soft, her hands clutching someone else's shoulders. And that someone, Mark, my best friend since college, the guy who'd stood at my side when I proposed to Emily, who'd toasted our wedding with a speech about loyalty. The same Mark who'd hugged me at my birthday party last week, grinning like he wasn't already screwing my wife behind my back. They didn't see me. They were too lost in each other, their whispers and touches a private world I wasn't supposed to invade. The sight burned itself into my brain, every detail, every curve of her body, every smug tilt of his mouth. My chest tightened, rage and grief warring for control. I wanted to scream, to tear the door off its hinges, to drag him out and beat him until he begged for mercy. But I didn't. Instead, I did something worse. I turned around, silent as I'd come, and slipped back downstairs. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys and the wine, leaving the house as quietly as I'd entered. I drove to a park a few miles away, parked under a drooping willow, and sat there, staring at the bottle in my lap. The world felt unreal, like I'd slipped into someone else's nightmare. That's when it hit Menno, just the betrayal, but the opportunity. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought I was clueless, the oblivious husband too busy with work to notice. Fine. Let them think that. Let them feel safe. Because I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I was going to plan. And my revenge? It would be surgical, devastating, and so perfectly executed they'd never see it coming. What's the plan? For 3 days, I played the part of the oblivious husband to perfection. I kissed Emily good morning, my lips brushing her cheek while my skin crawled. I cooked her breakfast, scrambled eggs with the little sprinkle of paprika she liked, and smiled as she thanked me. I texted Mark about grabbing beers that weekend, throwing in a dumb joke about our college days to keep him at ease. Every word, every gesture was a performance, and I was flawless. Inside, though, I was a storm. Rage churned in my chest, a constant pressure threatening to crack my ribs. But I didn't let it show. Anger was a tool, not a master. If I was going to destroy them, I needed control. I needed evidence not for a divorce court. No, that was too clean, too predictable. I wanted something far more satisfying. I started with the cameras. Tiny, high-definition devices, no bigger than a thumbnail, ordered overnight from a shady online retailer. By Thursday, I'd installed them in the house, while Emily was at work. One in a picture frame in the living room, angled to catch the couch where they sometimes lingered. Another in a smoke detector in the hallway outside our bedroom. A third in the guest room, just in case. They were motion-activated, streaming to a secure cloud server I accessed from my laptop. Every touch, every lie, every stolen moment, I'd have it all, but I didn't stop there. Mark was sloppy, always had been. Back in college, he'd used the same password for everything, Maverick 8. I'd teased him about it once, and he'd laughed, saying it was memorable. Idiot! On Friday night, while Emily was in the shower, I sat in my home office and tried it on his personal email. It worked. What I found was a goldmine. Mark wasn't just cheating with Emily. He was stealing from our company TechWave, the software firm we'd built from a dorm room dream into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I scrolled through his emails, my pulse pounding. Fake invoices, shell companies, transfers to offshore accounts in the Caymans. He'd siphoned off nearly $2 million over the past year, covering his tracks with forged expense reports, enough to land him in federal prison for a decade, maybe more. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my face. Prison was too easy. I didn't want Mark locked away, forgotten in some cell. I wanted him to suffer, to lose everything he valued, to watch his world crumble while he stood helpless. And Emily? She'd learn what betrayal really felt like. She thought she could play me, lie to my face, sleep in our bed after spending her afternoons with him. She'd regret it. I spent the next day digging deeper. I copied Mark's emails, downloaded bank records, and cross-referenced transactions with our company's financials. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Ray who didn't ask questions when I paid in cash. Ray tailed Emily, confirming what I already suspected. Her late nights at work were spent at a boutique hotel downtown, room 412, paid for with Mark's credit card. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the wall. I was building a wall that would trap them both. But I needed more than proof. I needed leverage. I needed to make them squirm, to feel the noose tightening before they even knew it was there. By Sunday night, I had a plan. It wasn't enough to expose them. I wanted them to unravel, to turn on each other, to feel the same paranoia and dread I'd carried since that Tuesday. I'd start with Mark. He was the weaker link, always had been. A little pressure, a nudge in the right direction, and he'd crack. I poured myself a whiskey, the first drink I'd allowed myself all week. The burn in my throat felt good, grounding. I stared at the camera feeds on my laptop, watching the empty living room where Emily would lie to me tomorrow. This wasn't about forgiveness or moving on. This was about power. What's the next move? I invited Mark over for poker night, just the two of us. It was a tradition we'd kept since our early days at Tech Wave Cheap Beer, a deck of cards, and trash talk about who was the better bluffer. This time, the stakes were higher than he could imagine. Emily was out with friends, or so she'd told me, her voice too bright as she kissed my cheek and left. I'd checked her phone's location before she even reached the driveway. She was at the hotel again, room 412, probably thinking she was so clever. Let her. Her lies were just more rope for the noose. Mark arrived at 7 p.m., all smiles and backslaps, carrying a six-pack of IPA like nothing had changed. "You're killing me at the office, man," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "Those new contracts? We're going to be swimming in cash. We should celebrate soon." "Oh, we'll celebrate," I thought, forcing a grin. "Yeah, big plans." We sat at the kitchen table, cards spread between us. I let him win the first few hands, keeping the mood light, letting him relax. He was halfway through his third beer when I made my move, casual as breathing. "Hey, by the way, the auditors are coming next week. Everything clean on your end?" His smile flickered, just for a second. "Yeah, of course," he said, but his eyes darted to his beer, his fingers tightening around the bottle. I leaned in, lowering my voice like we were sharing a secret. "Good, because if they find anything, we're both screwed. You know how these guys are. They dig until they hit bone." His throat bobbed, a nervous swallow he couldn't hide. "No worries, man. It's all good." "Got you." I changed the subject, dealt another hand, and let him stew. I could see it in his face, the calculations, the sudden realization that he might not have covered his tracks as well as he thought. He folded early, claiming he was tired, and left by 9 p.m., promising to catch up soon. As soon as his car pulled away, I opened my laptop and checked the cameras I'd installed at the office. Sure enough, at 10:17 p.m., Mark's keycard swiped him into the building. The feed showed him at his desk, hunched over his computer, deleting files, transferring money back to the company accounts. His movements frantic. He was panicking, just as I'd planned. I poured another whiskey, savoring the burn. Phase 1 was complete. Mark was scrambling, thinking he could undo his mistakes before the auditors arrived. What he didn't know was that I'd already tipped off the auditing firm an anonymous email with just enough detail to point them at his accounts. They'd find everything, and he'd have no one to blame but himself. Now for Phase 2. Emily. She was trickier, more guarded. Mark was a blunt instrument, easy to manipulate with fear. Emily was a chess player, always thinking 3 moves ahead. I'd need to be careful, to make her doubt, to plant the seeds of her own destruction. I checked the hotel's booking system, using a back door I'd found in their shoddy security. Room 412 was reserved again for tomorrow night. Perfect. I drafted a text to Emily, my thumb hovering over the send button. "Working late again? Miss you. I didn't send it. Not yet. Let her think she was still in control." The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. How does Emily react? Emily came home at 11:43 p.m., her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. She smelled of jasmine and guilt, the same perfume she'd worn when we were dating, now tainted by her lies. I was in the living room, pretending to read a book, the wine bottle from Tuesday still unopened on the coffee table. "You're up late," she said, avoiding my eyes as she set her purse down. Her voice was careful, practiced. Couldn't sleep. I stood, crossing to the kitchen to pour her a glass of Pinot Grigio. "Long day?" She took the glass, her fingers brushing mine for a fraction of a second. "Just work stuff," she said, sipping too quickly. "You know how it is." I smiled, leaning against the counter. "Funny. I called your office today. They said you left early." Her glass froze midair, her eyes flicking to mine before she recovered. "Oh, I had a client meeting off-site. Forgot to mention it." Lie. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. She set the glass down, her hand trembling slightly. "I'm exhausted," she said, forcing a yawn. I'm gonna head to bed. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from the security cameras, motion detected at the front door. I glanced at the feed. Mark was standing on our porch, his face pale, his fist raised to knock. Right on time. Emily frowned, catching the sound of my phone. Who's? The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I stood, brushing past her. Let's find out. Her face drained of color, her hand reaching for her phone like she could somehow stop what was coming. I ignored her, crossing to the front door with a calm I didn't feel. My heart pounded, adrenaline spiking, but I kept my expression neutral. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the collision I'd orchestrated. Who's at the door? What happens next? I swung the door open, feigning surprise. Mark? What are you? He looked like a cornered animal. His hair disheveled, his eyes wild. We need to talk. Now. Emily's wine glass hit the floor, shattering into a spray of crystal and Pinot Grigio. She stood frozen in the living room, her hands clasped over her mouth. I stepped aside, gesturing for Mark to come in. Sure. Emily was just telling me about her long day. Mark's eyes darted between us, his breath coming in shallow bursts. Listen, something's happening at the office. The auditors, they're early. They showed up today. And already came, I finished, my voice flat. This afternoon. His face drained of color, his knees buckling slightly. Emily grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. What's going on? She whispered, her voice breaking. I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen. The room filled with sound. The sound. Moans, whispers, promises they'd made in our bed when they thought no one was listening. Forever, baby, Mark's voice cooed on the recording. Just you and me. Emily's knees gave out, and she sank to the couch, her hands covering her face. Mark lunged for me, his fist raised. You bastard! I sidestepped easily, my grin cold. Oh, it gets better. I swiped to another file, pulling up his bank records, screenshots of transfers, fake invoices, the Cayman accounts. Meet the real Mark. A thief. A liar. And soon, a felon. Police sirens wailed outside, growing louder. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. What did you do? She screamed. Mark bolted for the back door, shoving past the coffee table. He didn't make it far. 2 officers were already waiting in the backyard, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Mark Sullivan, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud, one of them barked, slamming him against the wall to cuff him. Emily was sobbing now, her mascara streaking down her face. Please, she begged, reaching for me. I didn't know about the money. I swear I... Pack your things, I said, my voice like ice. You're done here. Her tears meant nothing. I'd seen her true face, heard her lies, watched her choose him over me. She stumbled to the bedroom, her sobs echoing down the hall. As the police dragged Mark away, he twisted to glare at me. This isn't over, he spat. I leaned in close, my voice low. Oh, it is. But I'm not done with you yet. Because this was just the beginning. The auditors had only scratched the surface. There were more accounts, more secrets, and I had them all. Mark would spend years unraveling the mess I'd left for him. And Emily? I'd make sure she faced her own reckoning. Maybe not today, but soon. I'd already sent an anonymous tip to her boss about her off-site meetings. Let her explain that. I stood in the doorway, watching the police car disappear down the street. The night was quiet again, the air cool against my skin. For the first time in days, I felt something like peace. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Thanks for watching. Want more infidelity stories? Hit the subscribe button and tap on the notification bell for more.